according to some reports, there were over twice as many Next Fest demos this past June than there were at the previous Steam Next Fest in February. And man, does it feel like it.
From the altars to tactical breach wizards, from Metal Slug Tactics to I Am Your Beast, Crush House, Caravan Sandwich, I can't keep up with all the recommendations coming in. And while it feels like we've reached a new peak with Steam demos, this hasn't come out of nowhere. Many of the games we've covered on Season 1 of By Design have had demos on Steam to drive wishlists in an effort to boost their eventual Day 1 sales, or simply to get people to try the game before they buy it. And it's not just on PC either. Palworld has a free trial on Xbox, and Baldur's Gate 3 has a 2-hour demo available to PS Plus premium subscribers. Say that fast 5 times.
So as we wrap up Season 1 of By Design, how about we look back at a phenomenon that has really only increased since we started this show late last year, the unlikely return of the video game demo.
First, we're going to talk about why this return is unlikely, the role that demos played in the past, and why they fell out of fashion. Then we're going to talk about the pros and cons of making a demo. And lastly, we're going to take a look at what happened with demos more recently, which developers benefited from releasing a demo, and which wish they could take that time back.
All right, let's jump in.
Short demonstrations of games have been around almost as long as games themselves, but the real heyday for the game demo was the 1990s. There are a number of reasons for this. 1, the gaming market was expanding and reaching new audiences. 2, games became more complex and nuanced, and as many games were copycats, it was important to distinguish oneself from the pack. And 3rd, piracy. With many early consoles and desktop computers using tapes and floppy disks to distribute copies of games, there was a culture of sharing and trying out new software. This is where Shareware came from, the idea of giving away a chunk of a full game with the hope that players would want to play more and pay for the full release. Famously, this happened with Wolfenstein and Doom.
This is, in essence, the idea of a demo. Give away a little slice of the game in an effort to attract players to buy the full copy. And so, the era of the video game demo began.
Initially, demos were more of a computer and PC thing. For instance, I grew up on a steady diet of demos on my Amiga 600. Not only ones I got from my friends, but from discs stuck to the front of Amiga magazines. These were known as Coverdisks, and honestly, most of the reason people bought these magazines was to get access to the demos. Demos were often so good and so replayable that you'd spend as much time on one of them as you would another full game. Early Nintendo and Sega consoles didn't mess with demos, but when the PlayStation rolled around, the demo scene exploded on consoles. This makes complete sense when you think about it. The PlayStation was an expensive console focused on an entirely new way of designing games. 3D. Nobody really knew what made a 3D game good. It wasn't like a 2D game where you could check out a screenshot and figure out if it was a genre you'd enjoy. This was a whole new world of video games. It was tougher to figure out what worked and what didn't.
The other issue is that the PlayStation 1 console was quite expensive, and so too were its games, so having an opportunity to play a game a little while before forking out all the cash for the full version was really important for consumer confidence.
In fact, the European market was so much more used to demos and getting free games with a machine that the Mega Drive came packed with a cartridge called Mega Games containing 3 full titles. And there were a bunch of these over the course of the Mega Drive's lifespan. Mega Games 1 had Columns, Super Hang-On, and World Cup Italia 90, later known as Sega Soccer. This was launched standalone in both America and Europe, but in 1993 Sega started bundling them with the console. Mega Games 2 was a European exclusive bundled with the console that came with Golden Axe, Streets of Rage, and Revenge of Shinobi, arguably 3 of the best games on the console. Europe's love of demos continued into the PlayStation era with the infamous Demo 1 disc, bundled with the console and used by store owners to tell parents that the machine did in fact come with free games, just short ones you'd have to buy your kids later. There were 7 different iterations of this PlayStation demo disc, curiously named Demo 1, Version 2 through Version 7, and I think some of them did eventually come out in America, but the real PlayStation demo scene came on magazines, where once again cover discs, now optical, were stuck to the front of mags with a small amount of glue. If you were lucky enough to find a magazine that didn't have the CD stolen from it, this was likely where you first encountered games like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, Overboard, Dino Crisis, and perhaps the most iconic PlayStation 1 demo of them all, Metal Gear Solid. The MGS demo was basically the opening 45 minutes of the game, including cutscenes and everything, right up until the DARPA chief dies. Spoilers. And it was infinitely replayable. It was through this demo that this oddball Japanese stealth game generated insane levels of pre-release buzz.
Demos, it seemed, were here to stay.
That Metal Gear Solid demo lives long in the memory and is perhaps a good starting point for the next piece of this puzzle. If demos are just small segments of a game, a slice of the full cake, then why did studios stop releasing them?
Well, games got bigger, teams got bigger, and the resources required to create a video game demo became more difficult to justify. And there was another problem too. When everyone has a demo, nobody has a demo.
In the early 2000s, PlayStation demos didn't go away, they were joined by Xbox demos. And by the way, this entire time PC game demos was also a thing. Demos were everywhere, and in an age before online video, this was how you learned how a game played. Games were becoming more and more complex, nuanced, and tougher to grok from a simple screenshot. But without the ability to watch them play, say from low-resolution trailers contained on a Coverdisks or the odd preview on a handful of video game TV shows, you had no options. But when online video spread through the internet-connected world, Coverdisks packed full of demos became less special, and more games became sequels, or at the very least part of an established genre. Gamers didn't need to play a bunch of demos anymore. They knew what they wanted more, and if they didn't, they could check out a trailer online. Console manufacturers still use demos to market games. The PSN store had demos for PlayStation 3 games, and Xbox Live Arcade and indie games on 360 had to have a demo version for folks to try. But the culture of demos was basically dead, especially on PC. YouTube and later Twitch were the final nails in the coffin when suddenly any game you ever wanted was available to watch in the same resolution and frame rate as your screen at home.
Demos, it seemed, were dying.
Another reason for the death of demos was the higher amount of labor it took to produce them. Sure, there were games like FIFA or Madden where you could simply release a version of the game which allowed an exhibition game between two teams, but with AAA narrative games it was a lot tougher to simply cut out a chunk of a game. Opening levels were often more tutorial heavy than before, and later levels usually required some higher bar of player skill that might actually scare off new players in a demo. Demos were also increasingly competing with a new wave of mobile and free-to-play games which were doing something very similar. Couple that with an entertainment media that was becoming more established, where genres defined which games you played and which didn't, where established studios now had track records you could gauge game quality from, where reviews, be it from video game websites, YouTubers, streamers, some random on Reddit, or thousands of randoms on Steam, made fishing for games redundant. These days, gamers don't need to play dozens of demos to see what they want. These days, the good games come to you through your social media feeds, algorithms, and online word of mouth. All of this has had an erosive effect on demos, which led them to essentially being gone forever.
Demos, it seemed, were dead. So, what happened? Well, I think games got interesting again.
We've talked a lot over the past 6 episodes about the games that have defined this time. Palworld, Helldivers, Baldur's Gate 3, Balatro. Games with compelling new ways of play that are on a different path to much of what AAA has been offering of late. That's because, quite frankly, much of AAA has been replicating and reselling the same game to us. This is nothing new, but there's something worse about the current level of design cynicism we see coming from the world's biggest publishers. The Ubisoft formula, the Call of Duty formula, Madden, NBA 2K, FIFA are basically the same game every year. Even Microsoft, lost for ideas and closing many of the studios they smuggled in recent years, are looking backwards once again. AAA is sort of stuck. It's hard to be risk-averse when the budgets are so large, and while all that has been going on, the indie space has had a profound change. Smaller teams are now not just capable of making interesting low-budget oddities, but games that look and feel well-produced, married with interesting new ways of play. In fact, there are so many of these games vying for wishlist attention each year that Valve now puts together seasonal festivals to get you to check them out. and so we've come back around to Next Fest. It's certainly inspired more developers to create demos, but it's worth mentioning that plenty of these games keep their demos up after Next Fest, and plenty more publish demos even without being part of Next Fest. This has had a knock-on effect where many of these games now also publish demos on the Xbox Store or PSN, and as I mentioned at the top of the show, even Baldur's Gate 3 and Palworld have gone out of their way to offer free trials of their games in an attempt to attract new players.
Quick sidebar, so I've been working with developer Alex Austin on our very own video game Stunt Derby, and last summer we actually put Stunt Derby in the Steam Next Fest. Now we managed to get, a few thousand wish lists. I think it was like between 4,000 and 5,000 in the 2 weeks that it was up there. But it also took a lot of resources. Alex had to work sort of non-stop on just the demo build for 6 to 8 weeks. It was a lot of work on the back end for me to set up the page and manage the demo and the promotion and the marketing for it over the course of those weeks too. And the other issue with Next Fest is that everyone else is doing the exact same thing. So it's difficult. I'm sure somebody out there has data on this, but when you're doing Next Fest and everyone else is doing Next Fest, it kind of also feels like, why are we doing this now? Why didn't we do this the week before Next Fest or the week after? But then the other thing is that there are so many people checking out demos because Next Fest is happening that perhaps wouldn't be any other week of the year. So I haven't got the data on it, but just anecdotally, there's an argument maybe for and against doing it the week of Next Fest.
But several indie devs I've talked to in recent months have mentioned how their Next Fest demos were critical to driving attention to their games.
There was an early demo, yeah. Then there was also a beta. So even that summer, we kind of had a tentative plan to release in February with the demo, the official demo, and the Next Fest in February. And the wishlist momentum just kept building, and it was timed perfectly with the Next Fest in February. Yeah, so that's kind of how it built up. I will say that neither PlayStack nor I was expecting anywhere near what ended up happening for launch, though. Our estimate was probably 20 times lower than what ended up happening.
We launched with 250,000 wish lists, so we thought that was kind of a good start. I think the Steam Next Fest was the kind of single most important event in the build-up. We featured quite highly on the Steam Next pages, and yeah, that's how we were able to kind of build up to a decent pre-launch amount.
Yeah, like Alex and I think would have been like pretty happy with 10,000 sales or something, because it's our first game. Like, why would anybody care? I think Nadi was a little more optimistic than that.
Realistic, it turned out to be. Yeah, no, I think it was launch day for us. We smashed through our 1 year target on launch day, so we're like, okay, we can maybe we can have a couple of drinks and enjoy this party before we're back to work on Monday.
We live in a very strange moment in the video game market. Much of the established AAA hierarchy is struggling under smaller margins. The games as service push has stalled out as there seems to be limited space in that particular lifeboat, and increasingly we're seeing new games from new IP take the world by storm overnight by doing a thing that all games should do, by exciting us with new ideas, challenging us to beat them, and respecting our time, intelligence, and money. We also live in a time where a lot of people are making a lot of great games, so if, once again, demos are a way for those people to get their games in front of prospective players, to excite them with a slice of a new idea, well, that can only be a good thing for games.
Perhaps a healthy demo scene is like a canary in a coal mine, but instead of signaling something bad, it's signaling that the environment in games is good, that it's full of interesting new ideas. Surely when a demo scene is thriving, it's telling us that there are great ideas out there, ideas worth celebrating and worth sharing.
It's been a wild half a year for the games industry since we started this show, and I genuinely have no idea what awaits us in the next half a year. It feels like a time of great change in our industry, but nobody is quite sure which way the wind is blowing. So if you've enjoyed this show by design and would like to see some more, please let me know in the comments.
In the meantime, I've got about a dozen more Steam Next Fest demos to get through, so I'm gonna go do that. See you next time!